Good afternoon, church family, as we're here to look at our Year of the Word reading for today. So, yesterday we looked at Acts chapter 8 and Acts chapter 9. In Acts chapter 8, we saw the deacon, most likely, but definitely evangelist Philip, who had went to Samaria and saw a great revival, saw God do incredible things. And God called Philip to go to this road between Jerusalem and Gaza to meet a man. And God had a divine appointment with an Ethiopian eunuch, and God saved that man. And incredible story. Then Acts chapter 9, we see another divine appointment. Saul, the great persecutor of the church, who hated the church, had received warrants from the religious leaders to have permission to go to Damascus and arrest people of the way, or believers there. But on the way, Saul experiences a dramatic change. See, he meets Jesus face to face, a great light, and there's a conversation. Saul's life is ever changed to the point where his name is changed to Paul. And so this man goes to Damascus, to stays at the home of a religious leader of the church there called Ananias. And God begins to do a mighty work in the life of Paul and begins to use him for the advancement of his kingdom in a mighty way. Today we're in Acts chapter 12. In Acts chapter 12, we're dealing with the apostle Peter. We find Peter in jail in our passage. But to give you a little context, the reason why he's there is, again, by the way, is because Herod Agrippa began to violently attack the apostles, and so, in fact, he kills James. This James, in the beginning of chapter 12, is the brother of John. He's one of the sons of Zebedee. He's a disciple of Jesus, and so this Herod strikes him down. He kills him. And so, seeing that the Jewish people were happy with that and pleased with that, he goes out and he arrests Peter. And he doesn't just arrest him, he throws him in the maximum security prison. He puts 4 squadron of guards around him. So the way that would look is Peter would be in jail, enchained, and there would be 4 soldiers who would watch over Peter, and there would be 4 different groups of 4 men that would swap out every 3 hours. So four soldiers looking over Peter at all times, swapping out every 3 hours. Why in the world would the Apostle Peter demand such high security? Well, I believe it's because Herod listened to the advice of the Sadducees and their experience all the way back in Acts chapter 5. You remember they imprisoned the apostles in Acts chapter 5, and an angel delivered them. And so this time, not letting that happen again, they put 16 guards, 4 at a time, on 3-hour terms. And so, thinking that they were going to keep Peter in. But the night before the trial, Peter was bound with 2 chains between guards, and an angel of the Lord comes and delivers Peter out of prison. And it's great that the gates open up for themselves, and God walks Peter right out of the angel of the Lord rather walks Peter right out of the prison. It didn't matter what the world threw at him. God wasn't through with Peter, and so God was going to deliver Peter so that Peter could do exactly what God had called him to do. God wasn't done with him yet. So God delivers Peter, and Peter begins to go to the house of the mother of John Mark. Her name is Mary. And there are all these people praying for Peter's deliverance. And so they're praying that God will deliver Peter, and it's really great because then God answers their prayer. I mean, Peter comes and he knocks on the door, and Rhoda, the servant, came and to see who it was, and she recognized Peter's voice. And so I love it because she gets so excited that she doesn't even open the door for Peter. They've been praying for Peter. They've been longing for Peter. Everyone inside's praying for Peter. She goes to the door. She hears Peter's voice, and so she runs back and doesn't even open the door. So yeah, I can just imagine Peter's face going, okay, and then keep on knocking. So Rhoda goes and tells all these believers, hey, God's answered our prayer. Peter's at the door. Peter's at the door. And they begin to say, no, you're mistaken. You're mistaken. It must be Peter's angel. So to kind of explain that in this passage, a couple of things. One, it's important to remember that Acts is a historical narrative. Acts is telling a story. It's different than, say, an epistle that gives us a lot of prescriptive truths. Acts is all truth and has a lot to teach us, but it's historical narrative. It's telling us a story. And so here, what we find is that the people thought that it was Peter's angels. So these are Jewish people, and in the Jewish custom, they had a firm belief in guardian angels. And in fact, they thought that guardian angels appeared right after someone died. Like when you died, your guardian angel would appear. And so we know that they thought that Peter was dead. See, they were praying for Peter's deliverance, but they were more prepared for Peter's death, his execution. But God had delivered them, and so they are amazed and shocked at at um, at Peter's arrival, and they stood there amazed. And I love that they've been praying, but they were prepared for the opposite. Church, I hope that we're praying for God to do great things and prepared for God to do great things, and not thinking people are out of their mind when God begins to move and work on our behalf. And so Peter begins to tell them how he got out of prison, and then we have the first mention of another James in verse number 17. It says, motioning to them with his hand to be silent, he described to them how the Lord had brought him out of the prison. He said, tell these things to James and his brothers. He said this, and he left and went to another place. So Peter's still fleeing for his life. He's not flaunting his freedom. He's trying to keep everyone, keep Herod and the guards, off his track, and so he leaves. But he mentions James. Now, this is the second James in this passage. This James is the half brother of Jesus. This James did not believe until after the resurrection, and is the writer of the book of James. And so that's the James we're talking about. He becomes a leader in the Church of Jerusalem. We're going to see him in the Council of Jerusalem. He becomes a pretty prominent figure in the early church, this James. But this is the first time we see him, and then so Peter leaves. And so the sun rises the next day, and Herod goes to look for Peter, and he's not there. And so, according to some Roman codes during that time, the prisoner, the guards were responsible to keep the captive in prison, and that if they let the captive go, that they would suffer the consequence that was meant for the prisoner. And so we see that these men were put to death. Therefore, we know that Peter was sentenced to execution, but instead these men died. And that's kind of where our story ends with our specific reading. So thank you for joining us for our reading today, as we continue to study the word of the Lord. And hey, let's be like the believers. Let's be praying for God to do great things, and then let's also live with expectation, trusting that God will do it. And so let us pray and prepare for the Lord to do great things today. Hey, church, I love you, and don't forget we've got prayer meeting and business meeting tonight. So please make a point to be here tonight, and we will see you then. God bless.